Greetings, fellow Earthlings. What's happening? I wanted to do a little talk about what's going on in the Middle East right now. This is Dave from the podcast and another thing with Dave. Um, and I want to pose some questions, right? Because we're being told a lot by the media, by the lamestream media. Um, there's a lot of misinformation. The first casualty of war is the truth, right? So, it came out, a reporter was saying that there were reports of the beheading of babies. Well, then she retracted that and said, well, I heard. Heard from who? Didn't give sources or anything, right? So, very similar to what we heard in the lead up to the first Iraq war, which is where this woman went on record on tape and spoke to Congress saying that babies in Kuwait were being taken out of incubators and left on the ground to die. Well, it turns out that woman made the entire thing up, and she was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador. So you got to be really careful and investigate these claims before we just have a knee jerk emotional reaction. I get it. I get it. It's, I'm on the side of peace for everybody. Nobody wins in war. But I want to look at this objectively and through the lens of critical thinking. So Israel's got this massively fortified border, right, between Gaza, Palestine, and Israel. So how was it that some guys in paragliders were able to breach Israeli airspace? I mean, that they've got a fortified border wall with guard towers every so often, right? Lookout towers. They've also got this the Iron Dome, right? Anti aircraft. So and we saw it in action on the news clips, right? Shooting down missiles, pew 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 pew. So that's clearly run by radar. So how did the radar and the guard towers miss these paragliders, right? There had to be a plane approaching that dropped the paragliders. So that's strange. And then hundreds of vehicles penetrate the border, the fence itself. That's strange. Where were all the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces? Where were they? Right? It's almost a catastrophic failure like we had on 9/11. Like, I don't know how they got through airport security, seeing as how two of them were on terrorist watch lists. I don't know how they got, flight lessons when they even told the flight instructor that they weren't interested in learning how to land the plane. Then not only that, but then you look into all the events of 9/11, like, Pentagon sure did look more like a missile than a plane hit it. Who knows? And then in Pennsylvania, where's all the debris from the plane? Sure just looks like a hole in the ground. That's kind of weird. And then the Twin Towers collapsing into their own footprint. And, you can be on the side of, jet fuel enabled floor collapse, the pancaking theory or not. But then there's building number 7, which, even if you think that jet fuel can weaken steel beams enough for them to collapse, and that a collapse of a few floors can cause runaway catastrophic failure that falls at almost free fall speed. So even if you believe that, all that stuff that defies physics, then there's building number 7. And all that stuff goes out the window because it wasn't hit by a plane. There was no jet fuel, and it collapsed straight down into its own footprint. And you can see that on film. So there seems to be some parallels between these two events, right? Or you could even compare it to Pearl Harbor, right? Like there's some people say, allegedly, that the U.S. intercepted transmission from Japan prior to Pearl Harbor and let it happen because that got the U.S. public to support the U.S. participating in World War II. So they call these things false flag attacks. It doesn't mean that the event was completely false. It means that the official explanation is false, right? So sometimes a government will let an attack happen and then use that to rally the country to war. Or sometimes, like with the Reichstag fire in Germany, they set their own building on fire, and that is what gave the Nazi Party, that propelled them into being able to take power. Right? They blamed that on somebody else, but they had set the fire themselves. So sometimes a government will let an attack happen. Other times they perpetuate the attack on themselves, on their own nation, in order to, sway public opinion usually in favor of going to war, right? So I just want to ask, like, how did this happen? How was there such a catastrophic failure at all levels of Israeli defense? It's hard to believe that would happen. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying it's incredibly hard to believe that level of catastrophic failure of security could happen. And then more food for thought. Look up Operation Northwoods, right? This was an operation during the Kennedy assassination that was planned. The Joint Chiefs of Staff all signed off on this plan and presented it to JFK. And he said, "Are you crazy?" And he would not sign it. And what Operation Northwoods is a plan for the U.S. military to fly remote-controlled 747s into U.S. skyscrapers. So pretty much like a precursor to 9/11. Killing U.S. civilians in a hopes to rally the public sentiment and get the public behind the idea of invading Cuba and going to war with Cuba. This is around the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis. So the military powers at the time wanted to invade Cuba, kill Castro. They tried to assassinate him something like 12 different times or something. And they funded a mercenary group, the Bay of Pigs, and their invasion, their attack was completely thwarted and failed. So the Joint Chiefs of Staff wanted to fly remote-controlled 747s into buildings. So that should tell you right there that they had the technology in the 60s to turn a 747 into a remote-controlled drone. So that's wild, right? I guess we're typically about 30 years behind the release of new technology that DARPA and our military have. So they were going to fly planes into buildings. They were going to bomb buildings, and they were going to kill U.S. civilians and blame it on Cuba. So don't take my word for it. Google Operation Northwoods. But anyway, interested to know what you all think. Isn't it weird that there was this catastrophic failure of Israeli defenses? If you look into it, apparently the reason that we support Israel, or at least AIPAC, AIPAC, a non-governmental organization, think tank, and lobbyist group, their explanation on why the U.S. needs to support Israel is that so we can thwart attacks using Israeli intelligence information. But if this is the actual quality of their intelligence information, then what is the U.S. getting for supporting Israel at the tune of $4 billion a year? Now it just went up to, I think, $6 billion a year after this attack. So it's all murky. It's all really murky. Ultimately, we need a two-state solution. I'm not condoning the Hamas attacks. I'm not at all. But I'm looking to how to settle the situation, right? So ultimately, we need a two-state solution, and we came close to that back in '93 with Yitzhak Rabin, the then leader of Israel, had voted for a two-state solution, the Oslo Accords, and it was going to go into effect in 1995. And then some, right-wing Zionist extremist assassinated the leader of Israel. And that ultimately led to Benjamin Netanyahu coming into power. So lots to think about. Let me know what you think. Ultimately, I'm anti-war, completely and 100% anti-war. But there has been an occupation for 75 years. Was the Hamas attack wrong? Absolutely. If it's what we're being told, it was wrong. Even if it was a false flag attack, that's still horrible, right? So either way, it's horrible. But, bombing whole neighborhoods of women and children and elderly, that's not a moral way to solve this issue. The only moral way to solve this issue is through negotiating a two-state solution. Palestine has been occupied for 75 years now. So anyway, I ramble on. Let me know what you think on the topic. Let's open up discussion here. Please be polite in the comments and have a great day.